Okay, I'm trying to impersonate the guy who is scared silly, quite literally. Welcome, huge movie fanatic Nate, stopping on by. This time I'm coming at you to review a movie. I generally don't review movies this old, but as you will soon learn, I'm a big fan of movies this old. Coming at you, or having recently watched this movie, or rewatched this movie, I thought it only made sense to stop on by and review it, so I'm coming at you to review the original from 1932 from Universal Pictures. Boris Karloff is The Mummy. I actually really like movies from the 30s, and like the early 30s is really great, and I'm a big fan of the original Frankenstein. I'm a big fan of The Invisible Man as well. I saw The Invisible Man first, and then later on, like, I think that was like when I was 12 or 13, and then like when I was 13 or 14, I'd end up seeing for the first time Dracula and Frankenstein. And for the record, I hold Frankenstein and The Invisible Man in very high regards. Dracula's cool, but it's just a little slow for me. I'm not the biggest fan of Dracula, but I didn't see The Mummy, the original Mummy, until probably Universal put out that Blu-ray collection, and the only reason I got it at the time was because it was the only way to actually have the 3D Blu-ray version of Creature from the Black Lagoon. So the first way to actually get that 3D Blu-ray was to get this collection they put out, and had like the first movies of all of these, you know, Dracula, Frankenstein, Invisible Man, Wolfman, Phantom of the Opera, I think, with Claude Rains, and Creature from the Black Lagoon. I don't know if there's anything else in there or not. But that was the very first time I'd actually seen The Mummy. For some reason, I never had any interest in seeing the original Mummy, and since then I've, you know, watched it a couple times and just recently rewatched it. And although I'll admit it's been a couple days and I may have forgotten some things, I'll do my best to do a review of The Mummy. And after all, it's like not a very long movie and not very complex movie, so it shouldn't be that difficult. I'll do my best. But this is, I don't know if this is still pre-code or not. There's a shot in this movie that's really gory, where a spear through like someone's chest, and you can see it coming out the front of him, and I was really surprised rewatching that. And then having watched, I don't know if I'm going to review any of the subsequent Mummy films because I don't think they're that great. I've actually got the Blu-ray collection of all the Mummy movies, and after watching The Mummy's Hand, which is just like, oh my god, just in my opinion, I mean, it's really almost not worth a review, and it's just very mediocre compared to the original Mummy. But they actually cut out that the goriest bit of, they replayed that scene where, you know, from the first Mummy where the guy gets a spear through his chest, and they actually cut out the goriest bit where you could see it coming out the front. So it's possible that this movie came out pre-code or whatever. I don't know when the end of pre-code, you know, era ended, but at any rate, whether it definitely has a gory shot in this that they cut out, you know, 8 years later when they did The Mummy's Hand. But 1932, man, I mean, this is the very beginning of sound era. A lot of these Universal movies from the, you know, the original Universal monster movies, you know, this one, just like with Dracula, I can't remember what the music is there for Frankenstein, but just like with Dracula, they played that piece of classical music in the opening credits of The Mummy, and I just love, I mean, who doesn't love that original Universal early 30s, you know, it's a Universal picture, the plane going around the freaking Earth, and because, you know, planes fly around in space out there, and they circle the Earth, but it's a Universal picture. I can't remember if there's an exclamation point there or not, but who doesn't love that original Universal logo and the little plane sound that goes with it? But how cool is the little miniature they made for the title sequence, where it's like pyramids and then the thing spins around? It must have been on a spinny table or something, and it spins around to reveal like the Mummy print on, you know, basically sculpted or whatever onto a miniature of a pyramid. I mean, how cool was that for a main title sequence to this movie? I'd say pretty darn cool. I'm not 100% sure. I would imagine this is based on a novel or a book. I don't know if it's, I can't imagine it's something that Universal would have created, but regardless, it's basically the, if it is based on a book, it's the book story or whatever, the kind of story that would go on to be featured in the Brendan Fraser 1999 Mummy movie that would come out decades and decades later with this basically this cursed, you know what? I don't know I can't remember. I'm not good with details on movies that I haven't seen that many times, so I don't know all the details. All I know is this, was it Imhotep? I don't know. I'm not good with necessarily details and names of movies that I haven't seen very much, but Boris Karloff plays like the Imhotep, or plays the main guy, whether that's his name or not. We'll just say he plays the main guy, who we get a backstory later on through a really, really cool kind of a crane shot going over this pool of there's some really cool visuals in this movie, mist or whatever, and it blows away, and you see like the visuals of the flashbacks of whatever character is talking about his past, and being, I can't remember why, if it's because he loves some woman that someone didn't want him to love or something, but anyway, this Boris Karloff character is basically buried alive as a mummy and buried or whatever, and this movie starts like in the is it like it might be 19, hell, it might be, I don't know what it's like 10 years prior to it might be 1920 or something, 21 maybe, that this movie first takes place, where these guys are, these Americans are in Egypt or something, digging up stuff. And what's really cool about the early Universal monster movies is that same, and I love this guy as a performer and just a character, but this guy is like I think he's well, I know he's in Dracula because he's Van Helsing, but then he's also in Frankenstein, and he's also in the same guy. I don't think he's in Invisible Man, but he's in at least Dracula, Frankenstein, and The Mummy. And I just love that guy, just the actor. And every time I see him, it means it's an early 30s Universal horror movie. But that guy is it's just so cool every time that guy shows up, because I saw Frankenstein and Dracula when I was 14, and it just brings me back. I just think it brings me back to my teen years, but it's also just like I just like that guy as a performer anyway. But he's in this movie, and very much the kind of he's always has more or less the same kind of authoritative role. But they're in Egypt or whatever, digging up whatever, they find this mummy, and they find this box, and it says, in whatever mummies speak, not to open this box, or a curse will be thrown about you, or whatever, however the hell it's worded. A curse will appear and get you, or I can't remember how it's worded. But of course there's the two main guys go out of the room, and this one, whatever, helper or whatever, he can't help himself, and he doesn't have to, but he proceeds to. He can't fight his curiosity, and he proceeds to break the seal on this box that they've exhumed along with the mummy, I'm pretty sure. And that thus begins basically the mummy coming back to life. And one of the things that I think is kind of a bummer about this movie is, as much as I would probably regard it as the best of the mummy movies from the whatever, the Universal classic monster era stuff, that I think that's kind of a bummer about it, is Boris Karloff spends very little time as like a mummy wrapped up in mummy stuff. And the Boris Karloff, at the very beginning of the movie, wrapped up in the mummy stuff, and in the coffin or whatever the hell it's called. That's some major classic imagery. And when he comes alive, and he basically doesn't even kill anyone, I don't think, at the beginning of the movie. He just like wakes up, and the coffin thing is leaned against the wall, the top's off, and he just wakes up, kind of walks out of the room. And it's really cool how these just show the bandages, like left, right bandage will just be dragging on the floor, so which indicates you don't even really see him walking out, but you just see the dragging bandages, left, right. That kind of subtle, really cool way of just depicting things in this early 1930s movie is just one of the things that I love so much about these early 1930s Universal monster movies. Oh, that's another thing. Years and years and years ago, I got the Wolfman collection on DVD as well, and my favorite, although the Wolfman is like the headliner in that collection, my favorite is the early 30s Universal horror movie, monster movie. Was it Werewolf of London, I think I want to say it is? That's my favorite in that collection, even though the Wolfman obviously is like the headliner. it's kind of interesting that, the one of the movies that was made later on was the headliner, and the Wolfman from London was made first, but it's like an extra, and it's just kind of weird. But the Werewolf from London is not nowhere near as famous as the Wolfman, which I think is a shame, because I really love Werewolf of London, or whatever the hell it's called. So the mummy doesn't even kill anyone, wakes up and walks out of the room, and that one guy sees this happen, and he goes out. It's really kind of a scary, one thing that I love about early 30s movies as well is they have their own specific kind of ways they do things, and this is very indicative of like the early 30s Universal monster movies, where it's just like there'll be this character who's just like, this guy, the way on screen they portray him being afraid is like doing this laughing, afraid laugh thing, which is actually really kind of creepy to behold. And the thing I tried to introduce, start the video with, I don't think I succeeded that well, but I haven't seen this very many times. But plus it's a hard thing to master, that scared, nervous laughter, or whatever, and insane, whatever the hell it is. But the movie cuts to, I don't know, somewhere like 10 years later, and they're back in Egypt or some crap, trying to dig. I see, this is what I mean. I can't remember all the details. I don't know why they're back or whatever, but they are. And this main woman is introduced, and I gotta tell you, man, she's got some kind of a classy, or not a classy, but a really, really unique look, and I can tell, I know exactly why, or, I can see why she was chosen for this role. This chick who's like the main, well, I think she's more or less the only woman in the movie, but the main, Imhotep's, or whatever the hell his name is, Boris Karloff character's, love interest or whatever. And another thing that may indicate this is possibly pre-code is just the scantily clad outfit that she ends up wearing later on, which is just like, even though there's, in my opinion, not a whole hell of a lot to see there, it still nonetheless is a very scantily clad freaking outfit she wears later on. But the whole premise of this movie, the whole 70 minutes worth or whatever, is just, for the rest of the movie, Boris Karloff does still play the mummy, but I mean, he's just like this mummy that wears this long, whatever, Eastern kind of, whatever the hell, just garb, but the mummy isn't like in bandages for the whole rest of the movie. The only part of the movie he's in bandages is the very beginning, which is kind of a little bit of a bummer, but whatever, that's the look that I kind of was hoping for throughout the course of the movie. But Boris Karloff spends the rest of the movie just as a character. I mean, he's the same character, the mummy, the cursed mummy guy brought back to life or whatever. But I think don't quote me, and if you're disappointed in this review, me not knowing all the frickin' details about it, I mean, you've got a point, and I completely sympathize. I just thought, since I watched it recently, I'd stop by to try to do my best review of the mummy. So from what I can understand, or from what I can remember, the rest of the movie is basically him, trying to get this broad who's this main, pretty much the only woman character in this movie. I want to say I don't know if it's her reincarnated. See, this is what I mean, like these details. I'm not good with all these details, but the mummy, whether this is her reincarnated or not, maybe she's very similar to this, I don't know. The mummy wants this chick. We'll just simply say that. I think the mummy wants this woman, and honestly, I can't remember much more. This is kind of a sloppy review because I can't remember much more what happens in the movie. Yeah, all I know is that, unfortunately, compared to things like Frankenstein and the Invisible Man, I do feel like this one, I'd say it's probably more interesting than Dracula. See, the thing about Dracula that I love is Renfield. I want to say it's Dwight Frye, quite possibly the guy who played Renfield, and then in Frankenstein he's Igor or whatever the hell character. Oh no, it's Fritz. It's not Igor. It's Fritz in Frankenstein. I love Dwight Frye as a performer as well. So he, of course, and Bela Lugosi, and also that other guy who's Van Helsing. That's the one thing about Dracula that I really like, is all those performers. But Dracula just gets so slow for me, where I might say the Mummy might be more like if I was, had to choose between Dracula and the Mummy, I might pick the Mummy. But it's hard, Renfield's fun, and Dracula, all I'm saying is this isn't for me nearly as good as like Invisible Man and Frankenstein, because what I love about Invisible Man, obviously Claude Rains awesome, frickin' the visual effects, Invisible Man's awesome. But what I love about Frankenstein is they just, not only is Dwight Frye great as Fritz, and the main guy who plays Frankenstein is frickin' awesome, but the thing that's great about Frankenstein is just the atmosphere. I mean, that's what you want. The great digging up a grave, digging up a corpse in a graveyard, and, you know, a big scary castle thing on a mountain, and wind and rain, and just, oh my God, it's, you know, the original Frankenstein's so visceral and just horrific, you know, in a more of a physical sense than this curse stuff. I'm not big on like movies like this and Dracula that, you know, it's more of what's going on isn't so much on screen, but like the curse that surrounds this or that. And it's just like, I'm more of a, something's on screen, you can see it, you can hear it, this is what the movie's about. Instead of, I'm not big on like curses and exposition, and he was buried and he's cursed and this has to happen for this and that and this. So unfortunately, I'm not the biggest fan of The Mummy, although I regard this one as probably most likely better than all the Mummy movies that come after, because that's just like, ironically, I think some of the ones that come after do more of what I kind of hoped would happen in this one, where the, you know, Boris Karloff is walking around in the mummy wrappings, kidnapping women and stuff. But I think that's what happens more often in later Mummy movies, which are inferior. But there's a lot of cool stuff. In closing, there's a lot of cool stuff that, maybe not a lot, but there's some cool stuff that happens in this, and some really cool close-ups on his eyes where, you know, they light up his eyes, Boris Karloff mummy and stuff. So there's really a lot of, there's maybe not a lot, but there's some really cool aspects to this movie. What would I give the star rating for The Mummy? I mean, oh gosh, I guess we'll go 2.5 stars out of 4 stars for The Mummy. Even though it's like early 30s Universal. I mean, as I already said, I mean, I'm not big on curses and this kind of stuff that exists off camera, these ideas. You know, I'm more of a, just there, it's on screen, you can see it, you can hear it, it's happening, it's scary, it's simple. You know, I'm more simple-minded. But in regards to movies, or at least this kind of movie, I don't know. I mean, I'm not opposed to whatever ideas, but when it comes to horror, like, I'm just not big on curses and all that kind of stuff. So I guess that'll probably be my review for The Mummy. Apologies if it's, you know, if I forgot key points or key this or key that, but much more of an Invisible Man or Frankenstein fan than The Mummy, I'm afraid. And it makes you wonder what I would have thought of this had I seen it at a younger age, you know, 12, 11, you know, 11, 12, 13, or 14, or whatever. Maybe I'd think more of it than I do now. But whatever. I mean, it was meant to be. I was meant to see it when I saw it, or whatever. So now, having seen it probably 3 times total over the course of however many years, frickin' decade or whatever. So guess that pretty much does it for my Mummy review. Hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks so very much for watching. And as always, we'll catch you on the next video.